Oddworld Abe's Exoddus is the sequel to the critically acclaimed Oddworld Abe's Odyssey that saw release on the PlayStation in 1998, a year after the original game's release, that follows and continues the journey of Abe from the original game, where he has received critical acclaim for being able to rescue his race of Medukans from Rupture Farms, but quickly understands that more of his tribe are being held as slaves in another part of the region. So with the help of friends, he sets off on a journey to try and save the rest of his clan from being slaughtered in exile. The game takes place in different types of environments compared to that of the original game, but expands upon it in many different ways, with a lot of new features, puzzles, elements and interactive control systems. So you do have a lot more traps and dangers to avoid, with keeping in line with some of the critical elements that made the original game so popular, with running, walking, jumping and also crouching, but also being able to sneak and hide in the shadows like that of the original game to avoid enemy detection. But you still also had the ability to be able to control different enemy characters to eliminate different parties, but also help you solve puzzles and so forth. Many new features were added to the game as well, with many of the Medukans having their own emotions, more so than what was seen in the original game, where they could get angry, become sad, and you generally had to do a lot more to get them on your side, as some of them could be quite reluctant and stubborn and wouldn't quickly follow you, so you had to keep enticing them with different incentives in order to follow you in many ways, even to a point that in certain areas they can be hit with likes of a certain type of gas that makes them get all giddy and laugh. So what you need to do is you need to remove them from that area, and you actually have to engage in slapping them or punching them in order to wake them out of the hysteria, which in itself is quite a cool feature, because if you don't do that, they're bouncing around and getting giddy the whole time. They don't follow your lead, or they don't listen to your instructions as well as they should, so you have to interact with them in different ways in order to get them to do what you need them to do. There were so many cool additions to this game that made it quite unique, that definitely stood out from what was seen in the original. But one of the best elements more known in the game was the addition of a quick save feature that allowed you to set your own checkpoints at different intervals, which was a feature that wasn't seen in the original game due to development constraints. But it was a much added feature, because it was the one thing that was criticised from the original game, because when you died in the original game you had to revert back to whatever the checkpoint was, which could be near the start of the level. You would have to go through so many different scenes just to get to that point that you died on, only to die again. Whereas with this, it cut out that hassle, so you didn't have to travel as far, or you didn't have to overcome all of those hurdles again. As like the first game, Abe's Exoddus is extremely difficult, if not even more so difficult than that of the original game, as even though they're a series that is synonymous with the history of the PlayStation, they're also among some of the most difficult games you'll ever play, as there's so many intricate elements that you need to use to get involved with interactive pieces, trying to get people on your side, trying to avoid enemy detection, understanding how to avoid and engage with disabling traps or opening doors. Everything has to be almost timed to perfection, but you also must be aware of your surroundings at all times. So an average or casual player coming in to play this type of game will find it very, very difficult. Only those that are patient and that are determined will overcome many of the game's hurdles. The development cycle for Abe's Exoddus was a lot shorter than that of the original game, as it utilised the same engine but added in additional features. But it was tough going for the developers, as it put a lot of pressure on them to get the game released before Christmas of 1998, which is pretty much common practice in what you see in games nowadays, especially with bigger budget games. They give you less time to get games out, but back in those days, unlike games today where a game would be released broken nowadays, but you can fix it through the use of patches and updates, whereas back then if a game released and it was broken, that was it. There wasn't really an awful lot you can do. But in fairness, Abe's Exoddus didn't really suffer with many issues that we know of, but still managed to capitalise on the success of the iconic first game. But it was still slated for being too difficult for the more casual gamer. That was the main issue with the game. But with that being said, like the first game, it went on to spawn multiple different sequels, spin-offs, reimaginings, remakes. It is considered to be one of the most iconic series ever in games history, and even just on the PlayStation itself, as it really stood out for its time with its diverse set of gameplay features and mechanics that really was way ahead of its time during that time period. Plus it also made 2D games popular again due to the level of detail. So if you're a fan of any of the Oddworld games, especially on the original PlayStation, now would be a great time to go and revisit the games, as they've been recently added to the PlayStation Plus Premium catalogue lineup. So it is a great excuse to go back and revisit these games. Plus you do have the additional elements with emulation, being able to play with updated visuals, but you also have the rewind system. So with this game being difficult, you can rewind at different points without having to worry about the save states. So you can literally just rewind the game at any point should you make a mistake, and believe me, you will make a lot of them in these games. That is guaranteed, without fail. But whether you're new to the Oddworld games or if you're a fan wanting to revisit them, now is a good opportunity to do that. Mind you, they will test your patience like they did mine back in the day, but they are still a really good series of games that are worthwhile looking into for sure, even just to get a glimpse of some of the iconic elements of gaming history and how they've evolved over the years. But I would love to know your thoughts of Oddworld Abe's Exoddus on the PlayStation itself. Did you manage to play it back in the day, or are you considering playing the game now in its current state through the PlayStation Plus catalogue with all of its modern elements? I would love to know just what you think of this game and even the games in the series in general, so be sure to share it down in the comments below. And if you would like to see more videos on many other iconic and unique, quirky and yet even difficult platform games that were also released on the PlayStation, you can check out the playlist on screen to see more of those games in action. And as always, keep those gaming memories alive.